Hello. In this video, we continue our discussion of Plato's Republic, Book 2, and then we will move on to Book 3 as well. As we mentioned in the previous video, the ideal city or republic that Plato made Socrates envision in the first and in the second book of the Republic has three different classes or three different types of people. The first is the producers, the second the auxiliaries, and the third is the guardians. And he talks about how the guardians are both the warriors and the rulers, the protectors of the keepers of peace. They should maintain peace within the republic, within the city, and therefore they are the most important class and their education is extremely important. So the rest of Republic Book 2 and Book 3 are about the education of these guardians. Socrates says that guardians should be carefully selected and educated through physical training for the body and music and poetry for the soul. So first of all, there is a selection of guardians. That means according to the theory of specialization, the principle of specialization, each person has an aptitude for a particular kind of job or task. So people should monitor the children to make sure that whether they have the aptitude to become a true guardian, and select those children, take them away from their parents and educate them together. And this education has both physical and mental aspects. So there is of course physical training for the body, and for the soul there is music and poetry. Music and poetry will help to refine the guardian soul, just as physical training, rigorous physical training will enhance their body. So both are important. And the education of guardians is an important process through which the unhealthy, luxurious city can be purified. So as we already mentioned, the first stage of the city, which Socrates calls a healthy city, is a city in which there are only producers. But as Glaucon pointed out, that is almost like a city of pigs. Even though it is healthy, even though the first stage of the city is healthy, it doesn't have any higher aspirations. It is a city that is only concerned with day-to-day affairs and with basic needs. In the second stage, the luxurious city or the city of fevers, this changes and more luxuries and artistic aesthetic pursuits come into being. But again, it is not a very healthy city. So first stage, healthy city, but it only caters to basic needs. Second stage, it caters to a lot more than basic needs, but it is an unhealthy city because it is a luxurious city. People are prone to indulgence, overindulgence. In the third stage, the guardians are those who can actually purify this unhealthy, luxurious city and make it into an ideal state. So if the guardians are corrupt, then the city will also be corrupt. If only if the guardians are pure, only if they are properly educated, and only if they become pure and completely unselfish and just rulers, only then can the city also be purified and become an ideal city. So in the rest of book 2, Socrates discusses what kind of stories are appropriate to mold a guardian soul. So as we already mentioned, music and poetry are important to refine the guardian soul. So what kind of stories are appropriate to be told in these poems and other kinds of artworks? Socrates rules out all poetry from the just city except hymns to the gods and eulogies to famous men. He also places restrictions on painting and architecture. So it's not just poetry or literature. Whatever kind of artwork there is, painting, architecture, etc., he places restrictions on them. He says only some kinds of art should be allowed in the just city and all others should be exempted. All others should be expelled from the just city. And what kind of poetry is allowed in the just city? He says all poetry should be ruled out. The only types of poems that should be allowed are hymns to the gods and eulogies to famous men. Hymns to the gods are the songs that praise gods. which means that they are praising the virtues of gods. This is fine because then the guardians will feel like imitating those same virtues. They will feel like becoming, they will feel like emulating the gods, and that is good. Eulogies to famous men are also songs praising the deeds of famous men, of great heroes, which is also fine because again it is the virtues of those men that are being highlighted, and again the guardians will be inspired by their life stories. So these two are okay. Hymns to the gods and eulogies to famous men, all other kinds of poetry has to be expelled from the just city, and similar restrictions are also placed on other art forms like painting and architecture. Socrates comes up with two rules regarding the kind of stories or poems to be represented. These are rules about how the gods should be represented in these stories. First rule is that the gods must always be represented as wholly good and as responsible for what is good in the world. Otherwise, children will not believe in morality. So the gods should always be represented as good. God should not be shown as doing anything evil or selfish or weak. They should be always represented as wholly good. And they should be shown as responsible only for what is good in the world, not for what is evil. That means their actions should have only good consequences, not evil consequences. So this is completely against how gods were portrayed in say the epics like Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, where many of the gods are shown as taking part in human affairs, in acting for their own selfish interests and things like that. So that should not be allowed. If that happens, if gods are represented as being not completely good, then children will not believe in morality. So the children who are being educated are to grow up to become just guardians, and therefore they should only be taught the stories of gods who are perfect, who are just, who are wholly good, and whose actions lead only to good consequences. Secondly, the gods must not be represented as liars or as always changing their forms. Otherwise, children will not believe in truth. So, if gods are represented as liars, this is again something you can see in the Iliad, Odyssey, and in generally in Greek mythology. You can see that gods change their shapes, they change their forms to trick human beings because they are selfish and they want to gain something. Sometimes a god like Zeus will take on a different form to go and seduce some beautiful woman. So all this is wrong. God should not be shown as being liars. They should not be shown as tricking human beings or as changing their forms. If you do that, then children will not believe in truth. Only if you show the gods as being completely good and completely truthful, honest, only then will children grow up to emulate them and be good and be truthful. Then we continue on to Republic Book 3, where after talking about the kind of stories that can be told about gods, Socrates talks about what kind of stories can be told about heroes. Heroes must never be presented as fearing death, and Hades must not be presented as a frightening place. So you should never show heroes as fearing death. Heroes should be always shown as being brave and courageous, and they should not fear death. And not only should they not fear death, even Hades, which is the underworld or the afterlife in Greek mythology. Hades is the name of the god of the afterlife. It is also the name of the place where souls go when they are dead. Even that should not be shown as a frightening place, because if you show it as a frightening place, then the children who are growing up will be scared of dying. But the guardians should be full of courage. They should never be afraid of dying. Otherwise, they cannot protect the city properly, because they are also warriors and rulers. So they should emulate heroes, because heroes should be shown as completely unafraid of death. And the land of the dead, the land Hades, where you go after dying, should also not be presented as a frightening place. Heroes must not be shown lamenting others' death or laughing violently. These are two different things, but there is a connection between them. First of all, just like heroes should not be afraid of dying, they should also not be shown as lamenting others' death. Like in the Iliad, Achilles cries and he's like completely loses control when his friend Patroclus dies. His cousin, his friend dies. So that kind of a lament, hero should never be shown as being completely emotionally out of control when somebody else dies, because that again will make the children fear death. It will also make them feel that it is okay to behave in such a way where you are not in control of your emotions. And as a corollary to that, if the hero should not be shown as crying too violently, they should also not be shown as laughing too violently. Heroes should always be in control of their emotions. That is how heroes should be presented in the stories that are taught to the young children who will grow up to become guardians. Then, of course, like gods, heroes must always be presented as honest. Just like the gods, heroes are also somebody to be emulated, to be imitated. So they must be true, truthful, they must be honest, they must be courageous, they must be good and just. And this is true not just for poetry, but in painting and architecture as well. Socrates forbids artists to represent evil characters and encourages them to only represent the characteristics that the guardians should emulate. Don't show any evil characters as much as possible. Don't give any focus or highlight evil characters. Only represent those characteristic features of gods and heroes which are good, which are virtues that the guardians should emulate, that the guardians should imitate. Now, along with this, there is also an interesting thing that Socrates says. Socrates also considers a pure, non-erotic love between a man and a boy to be a vital part of a boy's education. So when he's talking about the guardians, it is kind of taken for granted that the children who are being groomed to become guardians are all boys. The ancient Greek city-states did not give any importance to women. So they are not even considering girls. So that is why he's talking about a man and a boy. But this is an interesting thing that he's saying. When a young boy is growing up, when he is being educated, there must be an older man who is like a mentor to him, and there must be a very deep but pure love between this man and this boy. That is a very vital part of a boy's education. He should feel the love for an older, mature man, and he should try to become like that man, and he should also have the guidance and affection of an older man. But Socrates wants that it should be a pure and non-erotic love, and it should not be contaminated by actual sexual intercourse. So it is a kind of homosocial or a kind of homophilia, kind of love between two people of the same gender, but it should not have any actual sexual element according to Socrates. That will be corrupting, that will be contaminating, because the older man should not allow this to become about his own sexual pleasure. It should be a way for him to mentor the young boy through his affection, through his love, and to for both of them to approach truth and goodness together. So according to Socrates, pure love is the motivating factor for education. There must be some motivation for each individual to gain education, and pure love is the best motivating factor. And without indulging in physical pleasure, the two lovers should try to find the highest form of truth and goodness together. So this is not the most important part, this is just a throwaway comment that he makes, but it also shows his attitude towards homosexuality in the ideal republic, because he says that sexuality itself is basically physical indulgence, and that should not be encouraged, especially for the guardians. And sexuality for the sake of reproducing and creating children, that is necessary for the propagation of the republic, but any other kind of sexuality is not something that he considers to be important, and therefore homosexuality is just an indulgence. He doesn't really agree with that, but he seems to strangely enough, he seems to really encourage a love between two men which is not completely sexual. So that is again something interesting about Republic, Book 2, and the Education of the Guardians. Now, apart from this, guardians should also undergo the sort of physical training that prepares them for war, because they are not just rulers, they are also warriors. Many of them will go on to become warriors. Not everybody can become rulers. So the kind of physical training they do should not be just the kind of gymnastic physical training that people normally do, but it should be the kind of rigorous physical training that prepares them for war. And the physical training for the body should be in balance with the music and poetry that is provided for the refinement of the soul. And this balance is important, because too much of the former, that is too much physical training, too much emphasis on physical training, will make the guardian savage. If they are not educated enough, if they are only into physical training, then they will become savage and wild. Whereas an excess of the latter, that is an excess of music and poetry at the cost of physical training, will make the guardian soft. So there should be a proper balance between physical training and music and poetry. If there is only physical training, the guardians will become very wild and savage, and they will not be refined at all. If there is too much of music and poetry and not enough physical training, then the guardians will not be strong, they will be too soft. So this is the idea of the balance between physical and mental training. Now, Socrates introduces a final class split off from the guardians. This is still again within those three classes. So while the guardians are being trained, and at a certain point of time they will have to undergo a certain level of tests. They will have to go through some tests, and only if they pass all these tests, they will become part of this final class called the rulers, who are the best of the guardians. The rest of the guardians, the ones who don't pass the test, will remain warriors and be called auxiliaries. Their role is to aid the rulers. So they are still part of that second class called the auxiliary class. So all the children who have the potential to be guardians will be trained, will be educated, and at a certain point of their education, they will be tested. They have to pass a series of stringent physical and moral tests. If they pass, then they can become part of this very elite group called the rulers. The rulers can go on to further their education. They can go on to refine themselves more and more until they become proper just rulers, just and wise rulers. Those who fail those tests can still become warriors. So they are of a slightly lower class than the rulers. They are still guardians, but they are lower than the rulers, and therefore they will be part of that second class called the auxiliaries. To ensure that there is no conflict over who should rule, Socrates suggests propagating another myth called the myth of the metals. This is very important to ensure that there is no conflict over who should rule, because already now Socrates has proposed that people should be divided into these three classes based on their innate talents, based on the principle of specialization, and according to that, only a certain people who have been selected in advance, who have been given this kind of education and training, and then who pass those exams, will be able to rule. But then sometimes the other people may not be very happy with that idea. So then how do you convince them? In order to convince them, Socrates suggests that there is a useful fiction called the myth of the metals. It is not the truth, it is actually a myth, but he says, let us propagate this myth as if it were truth. What is this myth? This myth holds that people are born with bits of metal in their soul. So the rulers will have gold in their soul, the auxiliaries will have silver in their soul, and the producers will have bronze or iron. So all human beings, when they are born, their soul will have tiny bits of metal in them. If the city is ruled by somebody with the wrong metal, then that entire city will be ruined. This is the myth. So if you have a particular metal in your soul, then you should only perform a particular set of tasks. This is the myth that Socrates says we should propagate, so that the ordinary people do not question the right of the rulers, the right of the guardians. However, he says, now this might sound very authoritarian, and it is actually quite authoritarian, because once you are an adult and your destiny is kind of fixed, you cannot change. If you are a farmer or a goldsmith, then you cannot change and become a warrior or a ruler or a merchant. It's kind of fixed for you. But there is a slight caveat that Socrates gives, which is that these metals are not hereditary. The children of somebody like a producer who has iron or bronze in his soul, it is not necessary that his children will also have only bronze or iron in their soul. They can have silver or even gold. Similarly, just because you are a guardian doesn't mean that your child will automatically have gold in their soul. They might have silver, or they might even have only bronze or iron. So, all this is possible. Therefore, somebody must monitor the children from their infancy onwards to discover their propensities, to discover what metal is in their soul. And then the children should be grouped according to their talents. All the ones who have bronze or iron in their soul should be grouped together, and then they should be trained as producers. Then all of those who have silver in their soul should be grouped together, and they should be educated to fill those particular roles which suit them. And only the ones who have gold in their soul, no matter who their parents are, irrespective of who their parents are, they will be grouped together and they will be educated to become guardians. So, children will be closely monitored from childhood, from infancy. They will be grouped together and they will be educated to fill the roles that suit them best, irrespective of who their parents are. So, there is a slight possibility of mobility there, even if an adult person's fate is fixed, they cannot change that. They have to go according to that. If somebody decides, if the rulers decide that your talent is in metalworking or your talent is in animal husbandry, then you can't change that. You have to do that for the rest of your life in this just city. This is again an imaginary thing, okay? This is what Socrates is proposing. But that doesn't mean that your children have to follow the same thing. All children will be taken away by the state and they will be monitored and they will be channelized into whatever occupation suits them the best. And finally, as far as the guardians are concerned, they should not be selfish. They should not be corrupt. This is very important. And in order to ensure this, Socrates says that the guardians should not have private property. They should not have the right to either have a salary or to have savings or to buy private property or to have houses of their own. They should live together in shared housing. They should not be paid any wages, but their expenses should be supported by taxation from the city. They are working for the good of the city, so the city should take some tax money, and that money should be used to support them, to pay for their food and their living expenditure. Apart from that, these guardians should not be given anything. They should not be given private property. They should not be given a salary, etc. Also, the guardians should be told another fiction, that they should never mix earthly gold and silver with the divine gold and silver in their souls. So, this is to ensure that the guardians will not be corrupt. They should be told that you have divine gold and silver in your souls. If you are a ruler, you will have gold. If you are a warrior, you will have silver in your soul. And this divine gold and silver should not be mixed with earthly gold and silver. That means you should never handle money. You should not take any money from anybody. You should never handle any money. You should be beyond all this. You should be at a completely different level. You should be philosophers. You should be rulers, and you should be wise and just, and you should be completely selfless and only care about the good of the state, about the good of the people. And it is it is only human nature for people to become selfish and to become self-indulgent. And in order to prevent these guardians from doing that from childhood, they should be taught that something very horrible will happen to them if they mix the earthly gold and silver with the divine gold and silver in their souls. So basically, the republic or the ideal city that Socrates envisions or that Plato makes Socrates envision in the Republic is founded on a large number of myths. The concept of the principle of specialization, first of all, that is again, it's not a completely scientific theory or anything. It is just an idea that he has, that this is the best way to do it. And then the myth of the metals that is taught to all these people, it is again, it is it's a complete falsehood. And Socrates says, he acknowledges that it is a falsehood. He says it's a fiction, but it's a useful fiction. And similarly, even the last one, the fiction that guardians should not mix earthly gold and silver with the divine gold and silver in their souls, that is also a fiction. So the Republic is actually built on a lot of falsehoods, on a lot of fictions, even though the concern is to actually to uphold truth, justice, etc. Which might sound very strange, but as far as Socrates is concerned, or as far as Plato is concerned, all these kind of falsehoods are not a problem, because they are not to benefit anybody. It might sound as if this is something that will benefit the rulers, but the way that Socrates imagines this ideal city, it is not to benefit any particular people, but to make sure that human beings do not give in to their baser urges, and that the pure city can exist. So it is only possible in imagination, but Socrates is trying to say that in these particular ways, if you educate children in these particular ways, and if you convince them in these particular ways, then you can build up an ideal city with just citizens. So those are the main points of books 2 and 3 of Plato's Republic. Thank you.